In 1851, the cry of gold rang out across Victoria. Virtually overnight, locals and new chums alike deserted Melbourne and Geelong and rushed to the Central Victorian Diggings in search of their fortune. By 1852, gold had been found along the Mackay Creek, about 100 kilometres north of Melbourne and 45 kilometres southeast of Bendigo. Diggers flocked to the rich terrain, and by the 1860s, its deep reef mines supported 35,000 people. But as gold recovery became more difficult, the mines began closing, and by 1880, less than 6,000 people remained. Mackay today has a new name, Heathcote, and until recently, its golden past was barely a memory. Then in 1987, the recently floated New Holland purchased the area's first mining lease. Today, New Holland holds exploration licences covering 34 square kilometres of the old Heathcote workings. In a joint venture with Sons of Gwalia, New Holland began test drilling for gold. Unfortunately, Sons of Gwalia pulled out, believing the scale of mining here did not suit its plans. Undeterred, New Holland formed a new joint venture with Weaver Oil and Gas to reopen the old Heathcote workings. And this is the result, the impressive Heathcote open cut gold mine, the third largest mine in Victoria. Bordering Crown land on the edge of Heathcote Township, mining began in September 1992. Today, the operation generates $9 million of gold each year. Capital costs to start the venture were kept to a low $2 million by buying second-hand equipment and adapting it to local needs. So today, the mine operates totally debt-free and with better than 90% gold recovery from every tonne of ore. Gold recovery begins with the removal of ore from the open cut. The pit's about the size of 3 football fields and up to 50 metres deep. A giant excavator digs up the ore, which bears just over 1 gram of gold per tonne. The mine's surface treatment plant operates 360 days a year, around the clock, extracting about 17,000 ounces of gold each year. Direct from the pit floor, the soft clay ore is stockpiled prior to feeding into a crusher which crushes up any larger rocks. The fine ore then travels via a conveyor belt to another nearby stockpile. A second tunnel conveyor removes ore from here and carries it up to the start of the treatment plant. Here it's mixed with water pumped up from below the pit floor to form an ore slurry. The slurry then enters the ball mill, so called because of the 15 tonnes of steel balls, each the size of a cricket ball, rolling around inside. And because the mill's lined with thick rubber, there's no noise pollution. Inside, the ore is quickly pulverised into particles smaller than 1 millimetre in diameter. When the ore slurry leaves the mill, it's pumped straight up to the first stage of the gold separation process. The first gravity separator is a jig, which is basically a fluidized bed sitting atop a woven wire screen. The bottom of each bed has a 75mm thick layer of fine lead shot. As the slurry flows over, gravity causes the heavier gold to settle into the lead. Then it's a simple task to regularly scrape out the gold and separate it from the lead. Another gravity extraction method involves sending the slurry down these Reichhardt spirals where the heavier gold travels the path of least resistance. So at the bottom, a collecting outlet near the centre of each spiral will catch most of the very fine gold. Lighter material such as clay is thrown outwards and is collected by another tube at the outer edge. Gold is also recovered by spinning the slurry inside a Nelson concentrator. This vessel's lined with rubber riffles, and centrifugal forces cause the heavy gold particles to concentrate behind these riffles. These riffles are regularly washed out, and the heavy material trapped inside them, including the gold, is then washed over a Gemini table. Here, the heavier gold falls to the bottom, where it's trapped and collected by another series of riffles. To remove microscopic gold particles, the Heathcote mine uses a modern electrochemical process at its $500,000 carbon-in-pulp, or CIP plant. The ore slurry is pumped into 2 leach tanks where cyanide is carefully added to dissolve the gold out of solution. Then the slurry passes down through these 6 smaller CIP tanks where tiny particles of carbon absorb the gold. Using this method, the mine collects the remaining 45% of the gold available per tonne of treated ore. Eventually, the carbon is filtered into an elution column where it's mixed in a strong cyanide solution to strip the gold from the carbon. Then the solution travels into an electrolysis tank where a strong electrical current causes the gold to deposit onto the steel wool connected to the positive terminal. The steel wool is later dissolved away using sulfuric acid, leaving behind a mat of gold. After all this work, the miners get a chance to see the product of their labour and skill. Each week, the Heathcote mine melts down its extracted gold inside this furnace. After 2 hours simmering at 1200 degrees, the molten gold is poured into an ingot mould. 10 minutes later, the now solid ingot is cooled in water and its slag removed. Typically, each ingot weighs almost 3.5 kilograms or 110 ounces and is 95% pure. Because of its efficient operations, the Heathcote mine produces gold at a cost of $320 per ounce. So with gold selling at over $500 an ounce, that's a healthy return for the mine's joint venture partners. But they're not the only ones who benefit. With nearly 30 workers here, the mine and its locally based exploration office are now one of Heathcote's largest single employers. The operation also injects over $300,000 a month into the central Victorian economy. And that's got to be good for the entire Victorian economy. The future holds even greater challenges for the mine. The large wastewater storage basins will be covered over and replanted with local native seedlings. The joint venture partners are also considering extending the present open cut towards the old Red Hill diggings and even mining underground via a decline tunnel. In short, the future for the Heathcote mine and Victoria's entire mining industry seems very bright indeed. And why shouldn't it? After all, Victoria has produced 75 million ounces of gold since 1851, more than 8 times more gold per square kilometre than Western Australia. And with further investor and government support, this production should continue well into the next century.